it is, but I've just been hearing a lot of noise.
And like all this weird stuff has been happening since the new neighbors moved in.
Lights go off all the time, honey.
It's happening again. The motion lights have been turning on and off every night.
Yeah, right.
I bet you it's gonna be that weird kid from across the street. Watch. Yeah, can you see him?
What the hell?
He's so creepy.
What is he doing?
Freaky, right?
Yeah. What's going on?
I don't know. It's weird.
Alex, what's happening?
I don't know.
Front door open. Back door open.
Alex, what's going on? Alex,
All right, so that should have been some of the trailer for Paranormal Activity 4. This is obviously the fourth installment in the Paranormal Activity series, the yearly horror series at this point that focuses on a family being stalked by a ghost in some capacity. This movie, as opposed to the third movie, which was a prequel to the first two entries, this picks up after the events of Paranormal Activity 2. We are now somewhat modernized as we're taking place in 2011, and spoilers for Paranormal Activity 2, because I have to set this movie up some way. At the end of that movie, we found Katie is now basically possessed. She murdered her sister and her husband, and she took the baby, Hunter, and walked away. Gearing up years later, in 2011 now, and Katie and her son, quotation fingers, they're living in some house, but we're not focusing on them. We're focusing on the house next door, which has a teenage daughter filming a lot of stuff, including the creepy kid who's now named Robbie, who lives next door and following their activity. Robbie and the girl's little brother, Wyatt, have kind of become friends to an extent, and this becomes amplified when Robbie has to move in with them because her mother, Katie, is mysteriously taken to the hospital. So, with Robbie in the house with all these people, crazy, weird things start to happen for whatever reason, and it is all captured via webcams on laptops, and what's the girl's name? Alex? Is it Alex? Alex is
Yes.
This is her own camcorder, which she for some reason has on her most of the time. So she and her boyfriend they capture a lot of what's going on and try to figure out things that are happening that are too spooky, and lots of paranormal activity ensues. So, with all that said, Alan Aguilera, what did you think of Paranormal Activity 4?
You mean paranormal activity 4?
Paraformal activity.
No, it's not good. Well, it's not as good as 3. I actually really liked 3. It was just kind of, I'm used to Paranormal Activities movies being really slow and deliberately paced, and then they all kind of climax in the last couple, in like the last 10 seconds. It's always like, whoa. This one kind of just felt like they were phoning it in. I thought it was funnier than scary. I wasn't ever like super freaked out, and I didn't ever really feel uncomfortable like I did at the end of Paranormal 3 or towards the end of 2. There was always a sense of uneasiness and a sense of something sinister around the corner or right out of frame, and in this one I was just like, I kind of knew what you were going to give me, and you didn't give me anything that was really different or new. So, I mean, I had low expectations anyway, and I kind of met them, but I just like watching these kind of movies in the theater, so that's why I went at the late show on opening night.
Maxwell?
I agree with Alan to an extent. Maybe I liked it a little bit more, and part of it just has to do with the fact that I really like the paranormal movies. There's something about them that gets under my skin. I think part of that's because I'm pretty open to, the idea of spirits or ghosts or whatever. I would say for the first time, even though these movies have kind of been cranked out over the years, this one maybe felt a little rushed, especially in the third act. Things happened really quickly, which is always the case, but I felt like something was missing. What I did really like about it was, I think having teenage lead characters was pretty smart, especially because the film is able to play on the constant struggle that parents and teenagers have of parents not trusting teens, which makes it, adds a certain level of tension, because of course we, the audience, knows that there's stuff going on, and Alex believes that there's stuff going on, but the parents are hesitant to believe, so that worked for me, and the last 5 minutes really, really freaked me out. I think it sort of played on some of the mythology they were building in the third one, shoved it in there at the end, so I thought it was, fine. I wouldn't say it's a, drastically noticeable dip in quality from any of the previous ones. It is my least favorite, but I still think it was alright.
Abe?
I certainly am more with Alan on this one. I felt as though this movie was really lazy. It felt as though the filmmakers... I liked the third one. I think I liked it more than anybody when we did the podcast, and I think it's primarily because it felt more real. And there weren't that many jump scares. It was kind of more like the weird paranormal stuff. Whereas this one, I think a lot of the editing gives you the jump scares. It's like, for example, I think Ben is in one location in a second, and then they cut, and all of a sudden he's like standing closer to you now. It's like, okay, Ben is the boyfriend, and it's weird. And then at one point, I was just thinking to myself, I hate that cat, because there's this one point where the cat just like comes out of nowhere, and all these, you know what I'm talking about? Like, in the boys' room, and the cat's just like, hey guys, surprise, I'm your scare. And it's like, alright, well, this is a ridiculous waste of time. So I just was kind of not as enthused by it as some of the other folks. I felt as though the third act, it really was rushed, and they didn't really build upon it. I think it really took you to understand the third, or to have seen the third one to understand the third act of this fourth one. And with that in mind, I felt as though when you get to that certain point in the third act of Paranormal Activity 3, I was freaking out because there's some pretty cool stuff that happens, and there's like this really dark shot, and then you just see this woman's face, and it's really spooky. But in terms of Paranormal Activity 4, I think it's just really boring. I didn't really find it to be very intriguing or engaging, and I was really I think the only things that were cool were the Xbox Kinect scene, and I was really bummed out by the mom, because instead of answering two simple questions that I remember, one of them being, how did Robbie know about the message before I did? And then she's like, you gotta try out this guacamole, it's delicious. And the other one is, honey, a knife just fell from the ceiling. Come back to bed, or else I'm gonna be really mad at you. Alright, well, I guess I'll come back to bed. So, overall, not very good.
Alright, so I'm kind of more with Maxwell in this one. I think it's the least of the series, but I did still enjoy it overall, and I think, and I'm also a big, and Abe, you're a fan of the series in general, though, right?
I'm actually okay with the first one. I didn't like the second one. I think you and I talked about that vacuum in the water, and we hated that, and so I'm like 50-50.
Okay, then I like the series the same like Maxwell does. I like the series because of the surprising amounts of narrative that's been established in these movies, and that's kind of what I came for, like, less to be scared and more just to be like, I want to see where the story's going. And so with that said, I appreciated that it continued things along, and I'm curious as to what Paranormal 5 will have to be, or Pair 5 starring The Rock, as I'm calling it. But over this movie, I would agree that it does have lazy elements. I think most evident is the way it edits around to make jump scares, as opposed to kind of creating more sense of dread. So you have like shots of like they're in one place and then just like quick edit to like someone standing somewhere else, and that's a scare. Like that doesn't feel earned. But what this series does, which is kind of the best thing about it in terms of kind of scaring people, is that you have situations where, you have a camera set up and people are in it, and then they leave the room. And so, regardless of what the scare is going to be, there is a good 10 seconds or whatever where the audience is looking at the screen, they're waiting for something to happen. They know they're going to be scared by something, they know something's going to pop out. But regardless of what that is, you're just sitting there watching an empty frame, moving all your eyes all over the screen trying to find what that is. And by the time it pays off, regardless of if it's actually something that serves to be spooky or just like a cat jumping in frame, you get scared by something. Not necessarily forever, you're not necessarily having nightmares about that one tiny scare, but I do like that anticipation of that scare, and I think this movie does continue to bring that up, and I applaud it for that reason. The way I gauge these movies is how well I sleep at night, and I would say that Paranormal 4 did not make me lose much sleep compared to the other three movies, maybe not 2, but 3 and 1 especially. Like, was legitimately scared by those movies, which was more evident by the fact that I didn't sleep very well. This one didn't do that for me. And, I mean...
You want to know what the scariest thing in this movie was for me?
What?
The lead actress was born in 1997.
Okay, thank you.
That is really scary.
So, I mean, like,
For a lot of reasons, Abe.
Alan and I saw this movie together, by the way, but,
Oh.
And Scooter, and it was awesome.
Yeah, Scooter screamed 4 times, so, that made it worth it, too. But, I mean, yeah, I think this movie's for fans of the series that, have enjoyed these movies up to this point, and, these kinds of movies in general. I don't think it's the best of them. I don't think it's the best example of a found footage movie in general. But I think it's decent enough. I would say that compared to 3, which I also really do like, which had essentially the coolest thing involved where you put a camera on an oscillating fan and make that create all sorts of tension. That's a great thing, and I don't think the Kinect thing's kind of nice, but they go to that well way too much. I think I don't think it works eventually after a while. Like I think the first couple times it's like, oh, that's pretty neat, but eventually just kind of wears off. But I don't think even that isn't as ingenious as something as simple as putting a camera on an oscillating fan that creates like an automatic amount of tension just because you're losing screen as it moves. So I feel like there needs to be some freshness brought up into the next one to keep this thing going if they're going to continue to make Paranormal Activity movies, which they surely are, since they cost like $4 to make and make,
Yeah, I think
times that.
That's the problem. It's just like they cost $4 to make, and people keep going to see them. It's like,
I mean, I'd find if I really hated this movie, I would find it a problem. But at this point, I'm still with this series. I still like it. I admire simplicity, and I like that. This series has been surprisingly durable in being able to create installment after installment, year after year.
the question becomes, where does it go next? Also,
That is a good question, and we can't say it goes to space because we saw that movie. It's called Apollo 18.
Well, we saw that in Leprechaun.
We saw that in Leprechaun and Apollo 18, which is terrible. So,
did you guys wait to the scene after the credits?
Nope. I missed. No, Alan and I missed that scene apparently.
Is there something?
Abe, I texted you specifically. You didn't see the scene.
No.
I specifically texted you to wait till after the credits.
Oh, I only remember the sinister thing. All right.
I specifically.
There was a scene after the credits, and it's entirely in Spanish. And seeing as how I don't speak Spanish, I don't know what goes on. But maybe the 5th movie's moving to Mexico.
Alan and I literally missed it by like 3 seconds because we got to the Paramount logo, and it's after that apparently.
Oh, that's mean.
Oh, after the Paramount logo, there was like another 4 minutes of credits, and then it was weird. But yeah, I don't know. I am interested to see where it goes, and the thing that Aaron said that I agree with is I appreciate the sort of narrative that they've built from film to film, and how it's not just they could have easily have made them isolated ghost stories with different people, different families, but the fact that they're at least making the effort to sort of tie it all together to build something a little bigger, I appreciate.
And that brings me to some other points that I had about the movie. But first off, this is the exact text that I sent to Abe. Stay till after credits in Paranormal. Just saying. But the idea of having like a new family involved, like that's kind of good, I guess. But it also like one of the problems I have with this movie, even though I do enjoy it, is that it feels like it's going back to the well, or it feels like the biggest example of diminishing returns by going back to a completely new family, as opposed to being involved with this family that's already gone through stuff. Now we're just dealing with completely different people that have to go through the same situation that we have seen in 3 prior movies already. And which is, I mean, that brings up, there's an incredible convenience involved when you have the same ghost terrorizing a group of family that finds itself in the same situation of being filmed in all areas and not being able to avoid being, shot on camera. That's the series in general that I can't really question the logic of. But you're watching you're watching a family again go through the same activity of, days at a time, there are creepy things going on, the nights, creepier things go on, and then about 12 or 13 days in, all hell breaks loose. Like, it's the exact same scenario. And I'm happy that they're trying new things, but again, we've already addressed that it's not new enough to make this a better movie than 3 per se. But it runs into that wall of like, well, how do we continue to make this fresh? Obviously, it worked for Maxwell and I more than it worked for Abe and Alan, but
I mean, I was gonna say, it seems to me like the best approach at this point to keep things fresh, and I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and write the next movie, but would sort of be to take the approach, even though I didn't think it was good. I don't know if you guys have watched the Grave Encounters movies, but in the sequel to Grave Encounters, they basically have a team of paranormal investigators investigating the events of the first movie.
Doesn't Blair Witch 2 do that also?
Yeah, to an extent.
Kind of like Wreck 2.
Meta with,
Yeah, right.
if you have
Yeah.
people who are aware of this demon or ghost looking into all of the events and starting to connect it together, it could at least move it away from the new family, new house sort of redundancy that this one does have a certain element of.
And see, like, I could propose plenty of ideas for 5 as well, but I feel like I'd be spoiling everything that happens in the end of 4, because there are some crazy ideas that I have for where Paranormal Activity 5 could go.
There are some,
Which includes a dystopian future plan that I have, but...
There are a couple shots at the end of 4, one in particular that kind of really surprised me.
Yeah,
Okay.
it involves quantity, I think, is what we're referring to.
Yes, that was,
Yes.
Yeah.
it was like,
But,
whoa.
I felt as though Part 3 really established all that, and it did it in a better way, and it was fresher there, because you have all these really, like, paranormal things that happen to these 2 young children in Part 3, and they're very creative. I mean, even the trailers, which they cut some scenes into, which you don't see in the final cut, or I guess the theatrical cut, is really intense. I mean, there's this part where in the trailer, like, the daughter is painting, and then she throws water on what is supposedly nothing, and then it becomes like this creature. And that was awesome.
That's the Connect thing. Again, that's like how that kind of...
Yeah, but the connecting is, you said it perfectly. It's like they go there too often, and it doesn't pay off. There's only like really, I think, 1 or 2 things that are spooky about it. But it could have been crazier, or it could have been like more freaky, where you have like a more visceral and memorable experience with it. And they don't do that, and it just felt lazy. And then the third act, it doesn't really come out of, and it's not that it comes out of nowhere, because it's understood if you
Yeah.
But it's just, you've seen it before, and it's not anything new, and it's just, I felt one of the parts that did spook me out was when she's calling somebody, and then the sound is coming from like her closet, and that was cool. But there's not really even that little tricycle scene. I was like, this is.
I feel there are things that feel like I agree that they're like 3 and what? Well, 3, because 3 I think does a good job of kind of bringing a lot of different elements into one thing. I think it does all of that better than 4. I think we're all agree on that this is the weakest one. But it does lack a certain freshness, and I do think it's kind of repeating certain beats, and it just doesn't do things as efficiently, and does feel kind of rushed. I mean, there's a part where like basically the daughter's on sleeping pills for some point, and you're like, where did that come from? And like the only reason that's established is just so creepy things could happen to her without her knowing it. And it's like, wait, why is she on sleeping pill? What?
It definitely felt like something was missing.
Yeah, and I mean the movie's 90 minutes at most. I mean it's lean, and so like, and obviously I assume they probably shot tons of stuff too, and they just cut it out just like they did with 3. It seemed, because I remember 3 had like all kinds of stuff going on in the trailers that you didn't see.
all kinds of cool.
It was like there was like
I think that you had brought up the one time where like the daughter like jumps off the balcony and then she walks back up the stairs, and I'm like,
which is actually
it's really scary.
Which is actually in the unrated version of on the Blu-ray. Yeah, there's that whole sequence where the daughter, she wakes up at night, she gets up and she like literally jumps off the balcony and then just walks up all happy, and it's like, that's actually pretty cool. But it's like, it seems like it feels like, I don't know if stuff was chopped out of this one, but it doesn't feel like it's as efficient in what it left in this time around. It just feels like it feels more evident that we're missing things. I don't know if they're, I don't know what the process is for making these kind of movies. I mean, they shoot like in June and they're released in October, so it's.
I think that's things that bug me out.
Does anybody else have a huge problem? I don't know what Robbie was involved in the movie for. Like, how does he play into it? Because I understand what Wyatt was involved, but why would Brady Allen, I think is the actor's name, why would he? I never understood why he was even involved with the thing. Like, he was a creepy looking kid. I mean, he looked like a mixture of Michael Shannon and Jeremy Renner after a bender, but I don't understand.
I don't want to spoil things, but I did have that question as well, given how certain things play out, I guess. the movie left me with some significant questions that I think need to be answered, but the series plays everything so close to the vest that I know I'm not going to get those until maybe 5 and maybe frickin' 6 at this point.
Please stop. But one of the things that bummed me out too is these were the same directors from Part 3, and I thought that they could take on where they left off, but they decided to kind of go back with the original storyline, I guess, and I think 3 was like a prequel, I guess. But it just felt, like you're going in a merry-go-round, you're going around in circles, because it's the same thing's happening. And so it's not really anything exciting or fresh, and it's, again, that's where I felt that was lazy.
It leaves me in a weird standstill, because the issue I had with 3, even though I like 3, is that it felt like it's just filling in backstory for me, and I didn't get any forward progress on the narrative necessarily.
I can understand that.
This movie, I would have hoped to have provided me more forward narrative, and it does to an extent because I get a catch up of where everybody is now, but it also still feels like an obvious placeholder for whatever they have in store for the next one based on what the ending of this movie is.
Yeah.
Let's move on then. Let's get to our rating because we've been going a little long. And so again, we have our same rating scale. So Maxwell, where on the scale would you put Paranormal Activity 4?
I guess I would say go see it in the theater just because it's the type of movie that benefits from seeing it with a good crowd and, again, 'tis the season to be scared in the theater. So.
Okay. Alan, where would you put this on our scale, our rating scale?
Probably Netflix. I don't really. I don't know. I didn't particularly enjoy it, but I know people that would like it, like my brother. But
All right. I would honestly, my rating for this movie would be if you didn't see it already at the midnight show, then you have to wait till Netflix. Maybe I think I've only watched these movies at midnight shows. I had to review 3 on Blu-ray, so I watched that one again, and mainly because that one's. I like the technical craft in 3 quite a bit, so I was happy to see that one again. But, I mean, honestly, I think this movie works best with crowds, especially with that kind of opening midnight crowd that hasn't heard anything about it already. That's why the first one was so successful to me, because I specifically avoided all trailers and just knew that this was a movie coming out, and it was only a limited amount of theaters, so I was happy with that. I mean, you know what to expect at this point from these movies, but still, I think that fresh viewing is a good one. Abe?
I mean, personally, I think that you just wait for regular cable, like FX. But I guess if you wanted to, HBO.
All right.